The champagne glasses clinked in perfect rhythm. Crystal caught the light of 1,000 tiny flames from candles arranged like constellations across the penthouse. Manhattan sparkled beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city offering itself as a backdrop to what everyone believed would be the social event of the season. Celeste Laurent stood at the center of the grand ballroom, her ivory gown cascading like liquid silk, her smile practiced to perfection. She laughed at something a senator's wife whispered, and the sound carried across the room like wind chimes. Elegant, controlled, flawless. But perfection is a fragile thing. Somewhere between the third toast and the fourth round of applause, Celeste's voice cut through the string quartet's melody like a blade through silk. "How dare you touch that necklace?" Every head turned. Every whisper died. A young woman in a black uniform stood frozen near the display table, her hands raised as if surrendering to an invisible force. Her dark eyes widened with confusion and fear. Celeste moved toward her with the grace of a predator closing in on wounded prey. Her beautiful face twisted into something unrecognizable. "You think I didn't see you? You think you can steal from me in my own engagement party?" The maid shook her head. Her voice trembled but remained steady. "Ma'am, I didn't touch anything. I was only arranging the flowers beside the table." Celeste raised her hand. And then something happened that no one expected. Adrian Vale moved faster than anyone thought possible for a man of his composure. His fingers wrapped around Celeste's wrist, just inches before her palm connected with the young woman's cheek. The room went absolutely silent. 200 guests stopped breathing. Phones appeared from pockets and clutches. Someone's champagne glass shattered against the marble floor, but no one moved to clean it. Adrian's voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of thunder before a storm. "No one gets humiliated in my home. Now, let me take you back 20 minutes. Let me show you what led to this moment, because the truth is never as simple as what meets the eye." 20 minutes earlier, Adrian Vale stood alone by the window, watching the city pulse beneath him like a living organism. His reflection stared back at him, and he barely recognized the man in the tailored suit and platinum cufflinks. 34 years old, self-made billionaire, founder of Vale Technologies, and in 3 months, he would marry the most photographed socialite in Manhattan. So why did something feel so terribly wrong? He couldn't name it, couldn't point to a single moment or a single word. But there was a weight pressing against his chest that had nothing to do with the champagne, or the crowd, or the expectations of everyone watching. Behind him, Celeste orchestrated the evening with military precision. She directed caterers with sharp gestures. She positioned photographers to capture her best angles. She adjusted the lighting 3 times until the diamonds around her neck caught the glow just right. Those diamonds. Adrian's jaw tightened as he watched her touch the necklace for the 100th time that night. The piece had belonged to his mother, a delicate arrangement of diamonds and sapphires that his father had given her on their 20th wedding anniversary. His mother had worn it only twice before she passed, believing that some things were too precious for public display. Celeste had insisted on wearing it tonight. She said it would symbolize her connection to his family, her acceptance into his legacy. But watching her now, Adrian felt something cold settle in his stomach. The necklace looked different on her. Performative, like a trophy, rather than an heirloom. He shook his head slightly, trying to dismiss the thought. He was being unfair. Celeste loved him. She had said so 1,000 times, and her actions proved it. She attended every charity function by his side. She charmed every investor. She transformed his quiet existence into something the magazines called a fairy tale. So why couldn't he silence the doubt whispering in the back of his mind? I want to pause here and ask you something. Have you ever stood in the middle of a celebration, surrounded by people who envy your life, and felt completely alone? Have you ever smiled for cameras while something inside you screamed that you were making a terrible mistake? If you have, then you already understand what Adrian was feeling that night. And if you haven't, stay with me. Because what happened next will change everything you think you know about love, loyalty, and the masks we wear to survive. Across the room, a young woman named Sofia Marquez moved through the crowd like a ghost. Her black uniform rendered her invisible to the guests who laughed and drank and celebrated around her. She refilled glasses. She collected empty plates. She smiled politely when spoken to, which was rarely. 26 years old, working 3 jobs to pay for her mother's medical treatments, hired by the catering company just 2 weeks ago because she needed the extra shifts. Sophia had learned long ago that wealthy people rarely looked at the help. They looked through them, as if service workers existed in a different dimension, visible only when needed and forgotten immediately after. But tonight felt different. Tonight, something prickled at the back of her neck every time she passed the main table. Something made her avoid the woman in the ivory gown, the one whose smile never quite reached her eyes. Sophia had seen that woman before. She was certain of it. The memory hovered just beyond reach, frustrating and incomplete. She pushed the thought aside and focused on her work. 2 more hours. 2 more hours, and she could go home, check on her mother, and collapse into the kind of exhausted sleep that offered no dreams. She was arranging white roses beside the jewelry display when she felt eyes on her. Cold eyes. Calculating eyes. She looked up and found Celeste Laurent staring at her from across the room. The socialite's expression was unreadable, but something flickered beneath the surface. Recognition. Fear. Hatred. Sophia's blood chilled. And then Celeste began moving toward her, and everything spiraled into chaos. "How dare you touch that necklace?" The accusation exploded through the room. Sophia stepped back instinctively, her hands rising to show she held nothing. "Ma'am, I wasn't anywhere near the necklace. I was only arranging the flowers." But Celeste wasn't listening. Her eyes had gone wild, her composure cracking like ice beneath sudden pressure. She pointed at Sophia with a trembling finger. "Everyone saw you. You were leaning over the display. You were reaching for the jewelry." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Heads shook, eyebrows raised. Sophia felt the weight of 200 judgmental stares pressing down on her shoulders. "I didn't take anything," she said, her voice steady despite the terror clawing at her throat. "You can search me. You can check the cameras. I have nothing to hide." Celeste laughed, a brittle sound that held no warmth. "Search you? Do you know how much that necklace is worth? Do you have any idea whose family you've stolen from?" She raised her hand, and Adrian caught her wrist. The silence that followed was suffocating. Sophia watched the billionaire's face transform from polished neutrality to something harder. Something dangerous. "No one gets humiliated in my home," he repeated, his grip still firm on Celeste's wrist. Celeste's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "Adrian, darling. She took your mother's necklace. I saw her." Adrian's gaze swept to the display table. His eyes narrowed. The velvet stand that had held the diamond and sapphire piece was empty. For a moment, Sophia felt her heart stop. The necklace was actually gone. Whatever was happening, whatever game Celeste was playing, it had just become infinitely more complicated. Adrian released Celeste's wrist slowly. He turned to his head of security, a broad-shouldered man named Marcus, who had been watching from the shadows. "Check the cameras. Now." Marcus nodded and disappeared toward the service corridor. Adrian then turned to Sophia. His expression was impossible to read, but his voice carried none of the contempt she expected. "What's your name?" "Sophia." "Sophia Marquez. Did you take the necklace, Sophia?" She met his eyes without flinching. "No, sir, I did not." Something flickered across his face. Not quite belief, but not dismissal either. He nodded once. "Then you have nothing to worry about." Celeste stepped forward, her composure partially restored but her eyes still burning. "Adrian, You cannot possibly be taking her word over mine. I am your fiancée. I am going to be your wife. Adrian's jaw tightened. And she is a human being who deserves the same presumption of innocence that anyone else would receive. The words hung in the air, like smoke. Celeste's face paled. Around them, guests exchanged glances laden with shock and speculation. I want to know what you're thinking right now. Do you believe Sophia? Do you think Celeste is telling the truth? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because this story is about to take a turn that no one in that room could have predicted. Adrian led Celeste to his private study, closing the heavy oak doors behind them. The sounds of the party faded to a distant hum. Celeste rounded on him immediately. How could you humiliate me like that? In front of everyone? In front of cameras? Adrian leaned against his desk, his arms crossed. You were about to assault a member of the staff. What did you expect me to do? She stole from us, Adrian, from your mother's memory. We don't know that yet. Celeste's laugh was sharp enough to cut glass. We don't know. I saw her. I saw her reaching toward the display with my own eyes. Adrian studied her face. He had known this woman for 2 years. He had proposed to her 6 months ago on a yacht in the Mediterranean, while fireworks exploded overhead. He had believed he loved her. But standing here now, watching the desperation flicker behind her perfect mask, he realized he didn't know her at all. Tell me exactly what you saw, he said quietly. Celeste hesitated for just a fraction of a second, just long enough for Adrian to notice. I saw her near the table. I saw her lean toward the necklace, and then I looked again, and it was gone. So you didn't actually see her take it, Adrian. You didn't see her put it in her pocket. You didn't see her hide it anywhere. You just saw her near the table. Celeste's eyes narrowed. Why are you defending her? Do you know this girl? Is there something you're not telling me? Adrian pushed off from the desk. He moved toward the window, looking out at the city that had made him rich beyond imagination and left him lonelier than he had ever been. My mother was accused of stealing once, he said quietly. Celeste blinked. What? When she was 19. She worked as a housekeeper for a wealthy family on the Upper East Side. The wife accused her of taking a pearl brooch. My mother was fired, humiliated, escorted out of the building by security. He turned to face Celeste. The brooch was found 3 days later. It had fallen behind the wife's dresser, but no one apologized. No one restored her reputation. She carried that shame for years. Celeste's expression softened, but something in her eyes remained hard. That's terrible, darling. But this is different. This girl deserves proof before punishment. That's all I'm asking for. A knock interrupted them. Marcus entered, his face grim. Sir, I've reviewed the footage. Adrian straightened. And? Marcus glanced at Celeste, then back at Adrian. The footage shows Miss Marquez near the display table, but she never touches the necklace. Her hands remain visible the entire time she's in frame. Relief flooded through Adrian, but Marcus wasn't finished. However, there's something else. About an hour before the incident, the cameras show Miss Laurent approaching the display. She removes the necklace and places it somewhere off camera. The footage cuts out shortly after, due to what appears to be a technical glitch. The room went very still. Celeste's face drained of color. That's absurd. I was adjusting it for the photographers. I put it right back. Adrian turned to her slowly. Did you? Of course I did. Marcus, check again. There must be more footage. But Marcus shook his head. The system experienced a brief outage. We're looking into it, but for now, that's all we have. Adrian dismissed Marcus with a nod. When the door closed, he faced Celeste with an expression she had never seen before. Where is the necklace, Celeste? How should I know? That girl took it. The cameras show she didn't touch it. The cameras show you removed it. So, I'll ask again. Where is my mother's necklace? Celeste's composure finally shattered. Her voice rose to a pitch that echoed off the walls. You're choosing to believe footage over your own fiancée. You're taking the side of some nobody Maid over the woman you're supposed to marry. I'm taking the side of truth. If you have nothing to hide, then help me find the necklace. Let's end this together. But Celeste only stared at him with eyes that had gone cold and calculating. In that moment, Adrian saw someone he didn't recognize, someone who had been hiding beneath the surface all along. Meanwhile, Sophia waited in the service corridor with two security guards who kept respectful distance but made clear she wasn't free to leave. Her hands wouldn't stop trembling. She had done nothing wrong. She knew that. But she also knew how these situations worked. Rich people protected their own. Servants became scapegoats. Justice was a luxury the poor couldn't afford. She thought about her mother at home, waiting for news about whether the experimental treatment would be covered. She thought about her two younger siblings who still believed their big sister would find a way to make everything okay. Tears burned behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. The door opened. Adrian Vale stepped through, his expression unreadable. Sophia braced herself for the worst, but Adrian simply said, "Walk with me." He led her to a small sitting room, away from the party noise. He gestured toward a chair, and when she hesitated, he sat first, as if to put her at ease. "I owe you an apology," he said. Sophia blinked. "Sir? You were accused publicly and unfairly. The cameras confirm you didn't take anything. I'm sorry you were subjected to that experience in my home." The words were so unexpected that Sophia didn't know how to respond. She had prepared for interrogation, for threats, for dismissal, not for an apology. "Thank you," she managed. "But I don't understand why she would accuse me. I've never even spoken to her before tonight." Adrian leaned forward slightly. "Are you sure about that?" Sophia's brow furrowed. The memory that had been nagging at her all night suddenly crystallized. "Wait, I have seen her before." Adrian waited. 3 months ago, there was a charity gala at the Whitmore Hotel. I was working as a server, and I saw her arguing with a man in one of the back corridors. "What kind of argument?" Sophia hesitated. "Heated. Intense. The man was threatening to tell someone something. He kept saying he would ruin everything if she didn't pay him." She handed him an envelope. "Cash, I think. And then she said something I'll never forget." "What did she say?" Sophia met Adrian's eyes. She said, "If you ever contact me again, I'll make sure you disappear." Then she saw me watching and went completely still. She didn't say anything, just stared at me until I walked away. Adrian's face had gone pale. "You're telling me my fiancée paid off someone who was threatening her 3 months ago, and you witnessed it?" "Yes, sir. I didn't think much of it at the time. Rich people have complicated lives. But now, seeing her reaction tonight, seeing how desperate she was to blame me for something, I think she recognized me. I think she's afraid of what I know. This is the moment everything changes." What do you think Celeste was hiding? What secret was worth paying to protect? Keep watching, because the truth is darker than anyone imagined. Adrian returned to the ballroom with a new sense of purpose. He found Celeste holding court near the champagne fountain, her laughter a little too bright, her gestures a little too animated. She was performing. She had always been performing. He simply hadn't wanted to see it. He approached her quietly. "We need to talk. Privately. Now." Something flickered in her eyes. Fear. But she smiled for the nearby guests. "Of course, darling." They retreated to a corner where no one could hear. Adrian kept his voice low. "The woman you accused tonight, Sophia Marquez. She remembers you." Celeste's smile faltered. "I don't know what you're talking about." "The Whitmore Hotel. 3 months ago. A man threatening you. An envelope full of cash. Does any of this sound familiar?" Celeste's mask cracked completely. Her eyes darted around the room, as if searching for escape routes. That was nothing. A misunderstanding. What were you paying him for, Celeste? Adrian, please. Not here. Then where? When? How long have you been hiding things from me? Her voice dropped to a desperate whisper. You don't understand. I did everything for us, for our future, for this life we're building together. What did you do? Silence stretched between them, and then Celeste said something that made Adrian's blood run cold. I did what I had to do to make sure nothing from my past ruined what we have. Everyone has secrets, Adrian. Everyone has things they've buried. You wouldn't love me if you knew who I really was. Adrian stared at her. Who are you, really? Celeste's eyes filled with tears, but they looked calculated rather than genuine. I'm the woman who loves you. Isn't that enough? Not anymore. He turned and walked away, leaving her standing alone in the corner of her own engagement party. What he discovered over the next hour would destroy everything he thought he knew. Marcus had been busy. With Adrian's authorization, he had pulled financial records, contacted a private investigator who had been quietly gathering information for weeks, and assembled a picture so damning that even Adrian struggled to accept it. Celeste Laurent was drowning in debt. Not modest debt. Catastrophic debt. Years of maintaining a lifestyle she couldn't afford had left her on the brink of financial ruin. Her philanthropic image was funded by credit cards she couldn't pay. Her designer wardrobe was rented. Her apartment was months behind on payments. And then she had met Adrian Vale. The relationship hadn't been chance. She had researched him, targeted him, engineered their first meeting at a gallery opening where she knew he would be. Everything had been calculated. Every smile, every touch, every whispered declaration of love. But that wasn't the worst of it. The man at the Whitmore Hotel was an ex-boyfriend who had discovered her scheme. He had threatened to expose her unless she paid him regularly. The payments had drained what little money she had left, making her more desperate than ever to secure the marriage before her house of cards collapsed. And tonight, when she recognized Sophia as the witness who could connect her to that shameful transaction, she had panicked. The missing necklace was a diversion, a way to discredit Sophia before the young woman could remember too much. Adrian sat alone in his study, surrounded by evidence of a betrayal so thorough that it left him numb. He thought about the proposals, the laughter, the quiet moments he had believed were real. All of it was performance. All of it was manipulation. He had been nothing but a target, a mark, a meal ticket, disguised as a love story. I need you to understand something before we go any further. This isn't just a story about deception. It's a story about the courage it takes to face uncomfortable truths and the strength required to choose integrity over comfort. If this resonates with you, hit that subscribe button, because the ending of this story is something you won't want to miss. Adrian walked back into the ballroom. The party was still ongoing, though the energy had shifted. Whispers followed him like shadows. Celeste saw him coming and moved to intercept him. Adrian, please. Whatever you think you know. I know everything. 3 words, but they carried the weight of complete finality. The debts, the ex-boyfriend, the payments, the scheme. I know why you targeted me. I know why you accused Sophia tonight. I know what you are. Celeste's face crumpled. For the first time, she looked genuinely desperate, rather than performatively distressed. I can explain. Please. Just give me a chance to explain. Where is my mother's necklace? The question cut through her pleas. She hesitated. Where is it, Celeste? Her shoulders sagged. She reached into her clutch, the small designer bag she'd been carrying all night, and pulled out a glittering arrangement of diamonds and sapphires. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone dropped a champagne glass. Cameras flashed. Adrian took the necklace gently, cradling it like something sacred. "You staged the entire thing," he said quietly. "You hid the necklace in your own bag so you could accuse an innocent woman and discredit the only witness to your blackmail payments." Adrian, I was scared. I was terrified of losing you. Everything I did was because I love you. Adrian looked at her with something that might have been pity if it weren't so close to contempt. "You don't know what love is. Love doesn't manipulate. Love doesn't deceive. Love doesn't build itself on the destruction of innocent people." He reached for her hand and gently removed the engagement ring from her finger. The enormous diamond caught the light one final time before Adrian slipped it into his pocket. "The wedding is cancelled." Celeste's cry echoed through the ballroom. She reached for him, but security stepped between them. She was escorted out with the same efficiency she had once demanded for Sophia. The party was over, but the story wasn't. 3 hours later, when the last guest had departed and the caterers had packed up their equipment, Adrian found Sophia in the service corridor. She was preparing to leave, her coat draped over her arm, her eyes red but dry. "Miss Marquez." "Sophia, may I speak with you?" She turned, exhaustion evident in every line of her body. "Of course, sir. Please." "Just Adrian." He led her to the same sitting room where they had spoken earlier. But this time, the tension was different, softer. "I owe you more than an apology," he said. "I owe you an explanation." He told her about the investigation, about Celeste's debts and manipulation, about how Sophia's testimony had been the key that unlocked everything. Sophia listened in silence. When he finished, she simply nodded. "I'm glad the truth came out, but I'm not surprised. People like her, they always underestimate people like me. They think we're invisible. They think we don't notice things." Adrian smiled slightly. "You noticed everything. I've had to. When you grow up without money, without protection, you learn to watch. You learn to remember. It's how you survive." There was a pause. Then, Adrian reached into his pocket and pulled out a worn envelope. "When I was reviewing my mother's papers last year, I found this. I didn't understand it at the time, but tonight, when you told me about the charity gala, something clicked." He handed her the envelope. Inside was a letter, handwritten on elegant stationery. Sophia read the words, and her eyes widened. The letter was from Adrian's mother. It was addressed to a hospital foundation, requesting that a scholarship be established for promising young women from disadvantaged backgrounds. One of the first recipients, mentioned by name, was Sophia Marquez. "Your mother funded my education." Sophia's voice trembled. "She's the reason I was able to finish school. She's the reason I could get certified as a medical aid. I always thought it was an anonymous donor." Adrian nodded. "My mother believed in helping people silently. She never wanted recognition. She just wanted to make a difference." Sophia looked at the letter again, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. "I never got to thank her." "You can thank her by continuing to be exactly who you are, by refusing to be invisible, by using your voice even when powerful people try to silence you." He straightened in his chair, and his voice took on a businesslike quality that didn't quite mask the emotion beneath. "I'm establishing a foundation in my mother's name. Its purpose will be to support women facing medical hardships and financial barriers to education. I'd like you to help me run it." Sophia stared at him. "Me? You understand the people we're trying to help. You've lived their struggles. You have integrity that money can't buy and courage that can't be taught. I can think of no one better." She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she looked out the window at the city that had nearly crushed her tonight, and instead had given her something unexpected. "I'll do it," she said finally, "on one condition." Adrian raised an eyebrow. "Complete transparency. Every decision documented. Every dollar accounted for. If I'm going to help build something in your mother's name, It has to be something she would be proud of. Adrian smiled. It was the first genuine smile he had worn all night. I wouldn't have it any other way. 2 weeks later, the newspapers had moved on from the scandal of the cancelled Veil Laurent engagement. Celeste had disappeared from social media. Rumors placed her in Europe, in rehab, in hiding. No one knew for certain, and fewer people cared. What did make headlines was the announcement of the Eleanor Vale Foundation, named after Adrian's mother. The launch event was small, intimate, and completely without pretense. Sophia stood at the podium, wearing a simple blue dress that she had owned for years. No designer labels, no borrowed luxury, just herself. She spoke about opportunity, about a marmative injuve cow, about the woman she had never met, who had changed her life. Adrian watched from the back of the room. He thought about the journey that had brought him here, the doubt that had plagued him at his own engagement party, the moment he had grabbed Celeste's wrist and set everything in motion. He had lost a fiancée that night, but he had found something far more valuable. He had found his way back to who he was supposed to be. After the event, Sophia approached him. "Thank you," she said simply, "for believing me when no one else would have." Adrian shook his head. "You believed in yourself. I just got out of the way." They stood there for a moment, not touching, not needing to. This wasn't a love story in the traditional sense. It was something different. Something about two people who had looked beyond surfaces and found something real beneath. Sophia glanced at the banner bearing Eleanor Vale's name. "Do you think she would be proud? Your mother?" Adrian considered the question. He thought about the necklace, now locked safely away. He thought about the letter that had connected two strangers across years and circumstances. He thought about the woman who had taught him that true wealth had nothing to do with money. "Yeah," he said finally. "I think she would." Outside, Manhattan glittered with its usual indifference. Millions of people living millions of stories, most of them never told. But tonight, one story had ended differently. One act of courage had changed 3 lives. One moment of truth had revealed the lies we tell ourselves and each other. And somewhere in the city, a young woman who had once been invisible walked home with her head held high, knowing that her story was only just beginning. If this story moved you, if it made you think about truth and courage and the masks we wear, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to this channel for more stories that stay with you long after they end. Because every story matters. Even the ones about people the world tries to overlook. Especially those